welcome to another episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
I'm Sara.
I'm Ari.
I'm Tori.
And I'm Josh. And today is a very special day on Literary Gladiators because it is Tori's birthday.
Yay!
It's the birthday.
And
that's cool.
So at the end of the episode, we will have a present for you.
Oh, that's nice. I don't have to do anything.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That's nice.
For the first part of your birthday extravaganza, we will be going over a work that you like.
Yeah.
And that is Coraline by Neil Gaiman.
Yes, absolutely.
I suggested it just for you.
Yeah. I actually read this a while ago, so the fact that it got suggested, I was super excited. Neil Gaiman is probably one of my favorite authors. Just hands down, I think.
Me too.
He can do no wrong. He has an excellent prose style, and just every single type of genre that he's attacked, he's done with such grace and just perfectly nailed it. So today we're talking about Coraline, which is a young adult fiction. It's counted as a dark fantasy, which I think is apropos. But I think it's interesting because if you ask Neil Gaiman about that, he says that he doesn't write dark fantasy. He just writes stories for children. So this is kind of a two-part question. Is this a story that you think is a story for children, or is it a children's story? So that's my first part of my question. And also, what themes do you think the book delves into that is applicable for children to learn?
I think first off, he writes stories for people. I really don't think he writes children's stories or stories for children, and I don't think he really conforms to any genres. He's very good at mixing bits of all different genres, and by default, to me, that makes it literary fiction.
Neil Gaiman is one of the few authors, and maybe for this general age demographic, but he's one of the few authors that I would call a jack of all trades. He can write anything for this demographic, age demographic, and he will always succeed. He is such a good writer, and he understands the psyche of the mind of the child, and he knows exactly how to reach inside and pull out exactly the emotions that he wants.
And he uses personal experience too. Like for instance, the term recipes, he grabbed that from his own son, and the crazy thing is son's meticulous tastes and the crazy things that...
Yeah. I think what else, kind of something that you brushed on, is that he kind of writes, and you as well, he kind of writes multimedia genre stories. Yeah. So there's no real one kind of pigeonhole that you can put him in, and that's what I think makes this so appealing to, anybody at any age. And also when I mean writing, stories for children, I don't necessarily mean subsect only children can read this. I mean that he writes stories that would be interesting for children,
but also adults read them as well.
Absolutely.
And they get a whole,
not a whole
meaning out of it, but get something different out of it.
Precisely. And so I think one of the things that he does wonderfully well is he teaches lessons in his story in such a way that it's not necessarily a lesson. It's proving that you as an individual can learn these lessons on your own and do so in a way where you come out the better person.
And it's not, in Coraline, no one is saving Coraline. She saves
Coraline
herself.
saves herself.
And in most children's stories, that doesn't happen.
So, even though there are fantastical elements to it, does so without having to need a magical MacGuffin of one
it's
or
very
another.
heavily weighted on reality, even though there's lots of things that
But I think it's a complete. I think it's to answer the second part of Tori's question. It's a learning experience for her because she's at the age where she thinks that she is at the peak of her maturity, where she wants to break off from her parents' grasp and go out and explore and. In some ways rebel by looking to see what's on the other side of that locked door. But at the same time, she's still a picky eater.
Yeah, exactly.
Where
she still won't eat vegetables.
She'll make
I
herself a
don't
frozen
eat
pizza.
vegetables either, so I understand which her plight there. But
Vegetables are great. What does everybody have against broccoli?
every time I have read Coraline, I've
You're
gotten
25 years
something
old and still no vegetables.
slightly different.
We'll table that. That's a discussion for another time. No, I'm kidding.
Every time I read Coraline, I've gotten something slightly different out of it. I've read it when I was really young. I read it when I was a teenager, and then I read it like just recently for Literary Gladiators. I've also seen the movie, and I think when I was a kid, I was more like, "Oh, this is just wow, like
It resonates
cool.
you. It's a fantastic
Bam,
story.
this is
Yeah.
interesting." When I was a teenager, it was more like, "Oh, why did Coraline do all these things? Like, why is this monster on the other side? Where did it come from? Who is this? What is?" I was asking more questions. Now, I don't need to ask questions because if you look in the text, the answers are there, and the feelings are there, and it's just it's a matter of maturity, and that's why this book is so good for all audiences, not just kids.
He does an excellent job at being able to write a story that has depth, but at the same time is very straightforward. He gives all those answers in such a matter-of-fact way. Of course, she's always been there on the other side of the door.
Yeah, there's no like more to it. You don't
And
have
it's
to
very
question it.
Carolinian in that aspect of, like it's always been there. It's always been on the other side of this door. It's always existed. And I think at one point, closer to the end, at the very, very end, when she's running back and she saved the spirits, the marbles with the souls and all that kind of stuff. So she threw the cat at the other mother and ran down the corridor. I think she says at one point, like, it's mentioned that she's in this corridor and it feels like she's, like, accidentally put her hand in somebody's mouth and that this thing is older and darker than, time in memoriam, basically. And so he kind of gives those answers of, these, on a straightforward level and, like, on a meta level. These things have been around for as long as we've told stories. So this is just another story. This dark thing that will always chase you in the dark is always there. And
It's a
has
combination
always
of
been
the
there.
monster in the closet and the parallel universe.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's the question of the fear of the unknown and adding to it and, amplifying that to the nth degree of there maybe something is in that a monster in your closet, and this is that monster in the closet because it's just this compound of a creation from years and years and years and years and years back, and will always be there.
And I think it was interesting that when you think it's over, it's not over. Like the monster does get out, well, not completely get out of the closet, but like it's not over, and the monster does be able to follow you, and that adds that extra sense of uncertainty.
Yeah. Do you count that as a happy ending? Would you count the ending of this book as a happy ending?
It was weird.
I wouldn't.
The hand and how she.
What was weird about it?
That's the mother on the other end.
The other mother?
Yeah, the other mother bet her right hand that that Coraline wasn't going to take her down, and the right hand was the only thing that got out to settle things once and for all. The ending is pretty much her. It's pretty much her having that sense of epiphany where she begins to understand her real parents and get ready to go back to school and wear the clothes that they want her to.
Yeah, fitting into society, but knowing
you have your own self,
who she is on the inside.
Yeah. I think it's Neil Gaiman trying to say our monsters never do disappear fully. Like
that's
you will always, you may always have some sort of issue, but like the issue's never gonna completely go away. It's just you kind of maturing and putting yourself in front of the issue.
So that is like a happy ending, but it's not the happy ending you expect.
It's a Neil Gaiman happy ending.
Like fireworks.
It's an ending of maturation. That's what it is.
It's a good way of putting it.
Because endings can be learning experiences. That's what many of them are. It doesn't necessarily mean that everything is completely erased. It's just patched up.
Because I really hate endings where all these horrible things happen and suddenly it's like, oh, everything's gone.
Oh, like A Wrinkle in Time.
Yeah, or like half of the Doctor Who's I've watched.
Why did that happen? God.
Oprah Winfrey.
Don't bring her into this. She has nothing to do with it. It was long before her time. Here's the question that I wanted to ask you guys. What do you think is the creepiest part of this book? It is counted as a dark fantasy. What do you think what makes it dark? What makes this story, aside from the fact that people have buttons in their eyes?
Darn.
I mean, yeah, that is it. That's a good one.
Go ahead.
I would say the residents that live in the apartment complex.
I was going to say
in
the
this
same
alternate
thing.
world, and that in their
The
that
other
circus
versions of
performance.
Yeah, I was going
That
to say the
circus
circus
performance
was
with the
really
dogs.
messed up.
And how the way that she interacts with them.
I thought the mouse circus was just creepy.
Like how
does Coraline
circus.
not see that there's something wrong here?
I think just the general.
I guess the
It's
whimsicality.
the idea that she's at that stage where she thinks that she is grown and mature, but she still has a lot to learn.
Still questioning, like, what is a normal threshold? And you're in another world, so it's this fantastical thing. Like, who knows?
And
Talking rats may exist.
Yeah, you're trying to figure out what normal is at that age too, and whatever's around you becomes normal. That's what you accept it as. I think like the scariest part of it for me was that she could like possibly accept that as normal and stay there. Like she could have like fell for
That
a
it
little
happened in the past. You have these three children who are the cautionary tales of falling into that lull of full sense of
The
security.
ones in the closet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the three
In the mirror,
children in the mirror.
Yeah.
So I think the creepiest part of the book to me, because it hits so close to like normalcy, is the the other mother's repetition of "I love you." And just because she says, I love you, you know I love you, you need to do this because I love
False
you.
sense of security.
And not only that, it kind of is like, it rubs a little too close to like home on certain things, because that's the perfect example of like an abusive relationship. And you can have an abusive relationship and not have it be romantic. It's the term gaslighting. I hate to use like incendiary words, but like that's the perfect example of like abuse. It's mental abuse and trying to prove that like the other person should be the guilty party because no matter what you do, well, I love you and I'm doing all these things because I love you.
So, like,
and
how
I'm
could
tearing
you do
down.
this
Yeah, how could
to
you
me?
be so
Yeah.
rude to me?
That's the whole,
You know.
and the whole that she promised her everything.
Exactly, the sun and
Just
the
to-
moon.
Yeah, the whole idea.
And I think that's the creepiest part.
But it's that whole, and it's also the idea that absolute perfection is not really absolute perfection.
And there's this really, it's probably one of my favorite moments in the story is when she's talking to the other Mr. Bobo, and she's like, and will I always have cake, and will there always be something interesting, and will there never be gray, dull, rainy days? And he's like, absolutely, those things will happen. She'll create these worlds and tear them down for you at night and kiss you on the cheek and tuck you in bed. And she's kind of like, well, I don't want that. Just because I want it doesn't mean that I necessarily need it. And it's this great, like, standing on her own 2 feet, facing down the dragon moment. And it just goes to show you that you don't need, like I said, a magical MacGuffin, a magical enchanted sword to be able to take down, you know, the dragons and the demons. You can do it on your own and do it in such a brave, not brave way. If that makes any sense.
Like,
you know.
well, I guess in a way, like you're scared, but you still have the courage to.
Well, and that's another thing that she talks about. You know, the instance with
That's a
her
courage,
father
yeah.
and the wasp. Yeah, that's that she says being brave isn't doing the right thing at the right time. It's doing the right thing and going back. To, facing those fears and going back because
It's doing what you have to even though you're afraid. Direct quote from Dr. Who.
So, I think this book does an excellent job at being able to look at, mature topics.
The Coraline at the beginning of this book is not the same as the Coraline.
Well,
in
that's
this book.
that's
and
always
that's what is the maturation is right
yeah.
there.
So, and that's what I was going to say is it does such a great job with showing a character naturally maturing by putting them in this otherworldly. Yes, it's an otherworldly, fantastical world, but does so in such a natural way that she's able to say, "I'm standing on my own 2 feet. This is who I am. I am now confident. I can go." And I think at one point in time she says, like, normally she's nervous before the first day of school, but she goes right to sleep because, hell, she fought, the other mother in that whole entire world. What's the first day of school gonna throw at her? And I absolutely love that.
Let's flip this for a second. You
Okay.
had mentioned something about abuse. I wanted to touch on that
Mental
for a minute.
abuse, yeah.
Not just mental abuse, but if you think about it, like, it's like, okay, Coraline, here you go. Here's some buttons. Put them on your eyes. Everything will be great. No, I don't want to. Well, you're gonna do that, or else I'm gonna go hey, I'll do everything. I'll lock you in the. It's controlling. It's absolutely
But that's
controlling.
exactly what I'm talking about. That is using the term "I love you." Just because you say "I love you" to someone doesn't necessarily make it true. It's like great aunt.
Yeah.
It's
okay.
trying to get the
and-
person to hear what they want to hear, just
So
to
they
make
do
them.
what you want them to
That's
Right,
the
exactly.
Yeah,
equivalent.
it's
It's
not
like
like
if Carrie's mother was not a religious fanatic, that is Coraline's mother, or the other mother.
The other mother.
Yeah. So that's what makes the other mother so insidious is everybody knows at least at one point in their life or another they will have an interaction with somebody who seems nice and means well and is saccharine, and they will use that one phrase like "I love you," "I do this because I care about you," using the term that should necessarily be true. It's kind of almost ingrained in our psyche as a society that just because somebody says "I love you" and is being polite, you
have
must
to respond
reciprocate.
back.
Absolutely,
Right.
you must reciprocate, and you
Right.
must be demure, and you must acquiesce to them. And I think this is a great story to be able to show someone like that's not
Not
okay.
true.
That doesn't necessarily have to happen. Just because they are blood, just because they are somebody who is related to you, doesn't necessarily mean that you have to acquiesce. You can stand up for yourself. You can love someone but still not agree with what they're doing. Granted, it will not be on an extreme scale of a soul-eating, centuries-old monster that wants to, tie buttons on your
it's
eye
possible,
and make you
but,
ice cream
know.
every day. But you never know. It might just happen.
Come out of
never
nowhere.
It's 2019.
It's like
Crazy
open-
things have
things
happened.
happen.
Things happen.
And
I mean, just like open the closet. Oh,
One of these days you might just end up in
know,
an irascible maw of an endless
there.
Diedrich horror. Eldrick horror. I can talk.
open the front door. Open the front door of the White House.
Oh God. No,
so
no.
Coraline
No,
can be
no.
ready for that. But how
I'm not
she
even.
was,
I'm not even saying anything specific. But
she was so just she thought of how unhappy she was in the beginning of the book, where with her parents, and then you have these perfect parents saying "I love you," but it didn't mean a thing because they were just trying to.
Well, also, this is something else that I was thinking about. You saying that just now made me think of it. It's all about perspective. We are
Right.
following, it is a third-person limited narrative. So to her, in all intents and purposes, her parents never listened to her, the world is dull and humdrum, and, granted, yes, people get her name wrong all the time, but she allows that. She stands there and huffs and sighs, but we don't necessarily see the whole entire image. So yeah, her parents may be wonderful parents, but at that point in time, at that instance, I'm so sorry.
she thinks things suck.
Things
Yeah.
and we've all been there. We've all been in that, that lull where we're like, oh my God, everything is like, nobody listens to me. I'm never right. I'm so bored. Life sucks. And so this is another great example of taking stock of the situation that you're in.
And I also
understanding that.
back to how Neil Gaiman has written the story. I like how Neil Gaiman wrote the story so that everyone, that means all four of us, anyone who reads the book will know that there is something wrong, but he's able to keep the mystery from Coraline's perspective almost throughout half the book. And we are able to see that what Coraline's going through and what is sinister and what is mysterious, but she doesn't know yet. So technically, you're telling two opinions of the same story at once, and it's done extremely well.
And he's actually made comments on that, saying that the stories that you read, we as adults looking at this helpless child in a harrowing situation, and we're sitting there going, oh my God, where are her parents? What? Who let her do this? And it's kind of the reverse, and he says that's not necessarily, I think I mentioned this in Ocean at the End of the Lake. I rate these stories not as horrible stories to scare children. I rate them as stories to entertain. So it is an entertaining, fall down the rabbit's hole. So these children aren't supposed to be scared by the story. They're supposed to understand you can stand up for yourself.
Right.
You can have confidence in yourself. You can do all of these things on your own and not necessarily need
And that
an
your
adult.
parents are not mean, they're just there to look after you.
Exactly, and that's the other
And I
thing.
don't think a child would even. I think an adult would think a child would think it's scary. I mean, a child could find the book scary for the eyes and things
Yeah,
like
the
that,
body
but
horror.
not that they would actually feel like they're in
Well, it all
danger.
depends on the
it
imagination
would be more
of the-
entertaining,
Exactly, yeah.
scary, that kind of scary.
Like, if I read this as a child, I'd probably find this absolutely fascinating and fun and like Alice Through the Looking Glass. Like, that, I would definitely find the correlations between that.
Yeah.
But...
And I think I found it pretty awesome when I was a kid too, but I know probably a few people who might not have wanted to read this. So I think it just depends on the imagination and the perception of the reader.
Yeah, I mean,
as it usually does for any book.
Absolutely. If you are a spoon-fed Disney fanatic, this may not necessarily. This might shock you.
It might, you might put it down.
It's a world of laughter. No,
But, you know, I think in the end, this is a fabulous book to read any age, any, gender. It's a marvelous example of narration done right. It's a fabulous book, and I think it proves a lot of good points, like the points that we've hit, self-confidence, taking stock of your surroundings, being aware that you can say no and stand up for yourself and still love somebody, or, vice versa, understanding situations that you're in and being able to go with your gut. And also never let anybody sew buttons to your eyes. I think that might be another good takeaway.
That's common sense.
I mean, that's like tattooing your face, your brain, piercing your brain. There's actually a song I know called "Don't Want to Pierce My Brain."
Well, I mean, technically, there's no nerve endings up there, so if you do that, go, just don't.
Bye.
Just don't.
I would say that it had Gaiman's elements done well, but I wasn't wowed as much as you guys were, or as much as I was with The Ocean at the End of the Night.
Right. Oh, absolutely. No, I completely agree with you. Like, I wasn't completely wowed like I was with Ocean at the End of the Night.
I thought that it was very rapid. I felt that
Because
Coraline was jumping place to place like a Tigger dance routine.
Tigger dance routine. Like a Charlie dance routine.
Charlie, if Charlie tried a Tigger dance routine, he'd be on the ground most of the time. But do we have any final thoughts?
I wouldn't want to be in that situation, but it was still it was a really good book, and it has changed. It's almost like Phantom Tollbooth, where every time I read it, it's a little different. But the only difference is I've read Phantom Tollbooth a lot more.
And I think that's the hallmark of a good story, a well-written story, is that no matter when you read it, you find something new to pull out of it as it takes.
I was thinking about Phantom Tollbooth because
I've never read that book.
the rapid situations. That's like the time Charlie hit Kim in the head with a soda bottle. But
duly noted. It's on the list now.
Phantom Tollbooth is.
You guys read it too.
It's like I can't help but think about when Milo was locked up, but the prison guard said that he only
Officer Shrift.
Yeah, Officer Shrift.
I know what you're talking about.
He only keeps him there.
See you for 6 million years. Okay, bye.
He only closes them and he doesn't necessarily keep them there.
Yeah, and
that's a clever way to keep the pace going at a rapid a level.
In a way,
this
that's
is
almost
just
what happened
boopity boppity boop.
But I get you.
Boopity. It's like I said, it's a story for children, so there's going to be a faster pace to it, so that way you get to all of the points that you want to without going too far in depth and
Also,
having them question.
Phantom
the wrong
Tollbooth is
things.
a longer book than this.
Yes.
So you have to keep in mind that if Neil Gaiman was looking for, I don't know, what is this, 150 pages? A little over 150 pages. If Neil Gaiman was aiming for 150 pages, he kind of had to skip around a little bit. Maybe that might be why you're not liking because you feel it's skipping around, but it's because it's a shorter book, perhaps.
Can I say this much? In the graphic novelization, it's perfect. I feel like the pacing is perfect and there's no lag time because those. I guess the empty spaces where he's explaining passage of time and it's a transition, it's imagery. And a lot of the really cool parts is the narration of Neil Gaiman himself is incorporated through the entire book. So it's part of the, it actually will, fade into parts of the image and it'll become part of the background and the environment. So if you are somebody who doesn't necessarily like sitting and reading, straight through something, I will strongly suggest picking up the graphic novel adaptation because it does contain a lot of the original content. It's adapted and illustrated by P. Craig Russell, and he's done a lot of other stuff for Neil Gaiman. He's done this. He's done, I believe he's one of the main folks behind adapting and illustrating the Graveyard Book. There's 2 volumes for that as well, which is something that is definitely another really good read. If you like this, if you like that
that's
kind
on
of
my
stuff.
to read as well.
You haven't read it yet?
It's
But
interesting
yeah, so
how
anyway,
she's illustrated like that, because the image that I have of Coraline is the film adaptation.
Yeah.
See,
So this,
yeah,
this I
I-
think is
I can't
closer.
help
I
to
want
think
to
of
read.
it.
I want to
Imagine
read that now. I love graphic novels,
Yeah.
but yeah,
You should recommend some graphic novels for
I should.
Josh.
Yeah, I should do that.
Alrighty then. How would we rate this on a 0 to 5 scale with half stars permitted? Sarah.
A 4.
Okay.
That's pretty solid.
I'd say 4.5. It's really good. Obviously, the graphic novel, this might, just by what I saw in there,
Yeah,
when you were flipping
it
through,
looks-
that actually looks like a graphic novel I might want to read.
It looks
It's
appealing.
wonderful.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm not usually a fan of graphic novels, so that's really saying
It's
something.
a good balance between like reading and then having the nice imagery, just kind of backing it up so that way it re-solidifies whatever is being painted. But
So
feel
I
like
would
Steve does a good
definitely
job
give
using
this
images.
probably a 4.5. As a small note, I didn't bring my ticket with me, but I did get to see Neil Gaiman at a seminar at Rowan University. I got to ask him some questions about this book, about where he got the inspirations from, and a lot of what we just discussed now is a lot of what his answer was, actually. So there's not much for me to say, actually. Just hit that little rewind button if you're not sure exactly what we said. But there's also a movie of Coraline directed by Henry Selick. Personally, I think it's okay. I don't think it's as good as the book, but it's all right. I think as a movie, I'd give it probably 2.5, 3.
We're not talking about the movie. We're talking about the book.
We're talking about the book.
You gave it 2.5 out of 5 in your review of the movie when we wrote for the high school newsletter together.
Right. So, but the book, I would definitely give a 4.5.
Yeah, I give it a 4.5 as well. I think it's a strong contender for, if you like creepy things, if you like Neil Gaiman at all. He does everything that he, writes. I think he does masterfully, and he sets out to accomplish whatever he's done. Like you said, it is a little on the faster paced side. It's it's a book for children. It's not a children's book. It's a book for children, but like we've said, there are some certain different thematic elements to it that I think, depending on your age, no matter your age, you will still find some enjoyment in it. And as always, Neil Gaiman's a masterful writer, so he will always be a wonderful narrator and will be enjoyable no matter
And
what.
just very briefly, if you guys know about the book series Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, illustrations in Coraline, in the original book, are very similar to that.
that's fun. It's like very
So it's
scritchy.
really creepy illustrations, so if you like that, you might like this too.
I give it a 3.5 because I think that, as I said before, I think this has all of the elements to a Neil Gaiman work, catered to younger readers as well as adult readers, but I think it's just so, I think it's rapid and it didn't have that wow factor that what I've read from him before, aka The Ocean at the End of the Lane, possessed. If you're interested in checking out Coraline, here's a copy of the...
Shoot, I sent mine flying. That was bad, that was bad, that was bad.
Here's a copy of the regular book, and
this is the graphic
Tori's
novel
got
adaptation.
the graphic novel. And before we go, I said that I had a gift for Tori. And here it
fun.
is. It's a little bit heavy,
Oh
and
boy, what is
so
this?
be a little bit careful.
Oh, it's cold. Why is it cold? What am I staring at? What?
It's
there's the
Toronto
pig! There's the
Bergerac.
pig!
Oh my god!
It's Serrano de...
It's Serrano de Bergerac. I have my very own Serrano de Bergerac.
the blind Serrano de Bergerac.
He dropped his cigar.
Oh no! He had a cigar. It's Groucho.
Look at that face! That's horrible.
And he left me a note, too.
Oh, how magnanimous! Oh, that's the squeakiest snort I've ever heard. Best birthday ever!
Yay!
Be sure to join us next time for another episode of Literary Gladiators. Happy birthday, Tori, and keep reading.